Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Crimes. I am your host, as always, Tyler Groff von Rebick. That's right. The Groff has returned again. And today we're going to be looking into Charles Manson, the devil himself. I want to say thank you to everyone who watched the previous episode on Gary Ridgway. The reason I'm not currently putting sugar in my coffee is because I was planning to. I had already made this cup of coffee and stuff a few minutes ago, and then we had a slight technical problem and stuff, so we had to delete that video and then just start all over. I hadn't gotten into this, but it was storm alerts. What can I say? Anyways, I want to thank everyone who's been watching our videos and stuff. The episode on Gary Ridgway had been the first one to reach 200 views. I really thought Gaskins was going to do it because it was right up. It's getting there, but no, the Ridgway one. I mean, it's like 260, 270 views already. I'm almost to 40 subscribers. I got to say, I thank y'all. This is really y'all's doing and stuff. Everybody out there, you really helped me, and thanks for watching. Also, for the person who commented on the Ridgway video, sometimes my scriptwriters don't get all the facts and stuff, but we do try our best. And yes, I apologize for mispronouncing Enumclaw. Oh, still not going to try because I'll still screw it up. So let's go ahead and get into it. This script will have very little introduction, mostly because the name Charles Manson is known throughout several different types of documentaries, movies, and in popular culture in general. So we'll immediately just dive right in. Okay. At least now you don't have to have some introduction. Okay. Early years. No Name Maddox was born on November 12, 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio. His mother was 15-year-old Kathleen Maddox, originally from Kentucky. His father was Colonel Walker Henderson Scott, also from Kentucky. While Colonel is a title of honor bestowed by the governor of Kentucky, I actually am a Kentucky Colonel. I received that honor last month. Actually, it was in the paper. It was pretty cool. Colonel was actually just Scott's first name. Okay. It's possible he was named after his maternal grandfather, Colonel Calvin Klein, who may have also just had the first name Colonel. Colonel Klein's paternal uncle was the infamous lawyer Perry Klein, and his mother was Elizabeth McCoy, a cousin to the McCoy family patriarch Randall McCoy from the infamous Hatfield and McCoy feud. Okay, now I'm scared because I'm actually connected. I've done my family tree, and I think Randall McCoy is like my sixth cousin. So, God, I hope I'm not. It's getting personal. Now I'm related to Manson. Oh my God. Scott was a transient laborer, a moonshiner, farmhand, and also known to be a con man. Kathleen was an alcoholic, a petty criminal, and may have been a sex worker, but it's never been proven solidly. After Kathleen informed Scott that she was pregnant, Scott informed her that he was being called back by the army and would come back soon. Soon turned into never, and Kathleen realized she had been duped. When her son was born, she refused to name him, and he was known as No Name Maddox. Damn. The year he was born, Kathleen married William E. Manson, who gave the boy the name Charles Milles Manson, his first and middle name coming from Kathleen's father, Charles Milles Maddox. Unfortunately, why didn't she just give him that name? I mean, he could have been Charles Milles Maddox Jr. or something. It was better than no name. Unfortunately, Kathleen's partying and lack of fidelity caused William Manson to divorce her for gross negligence, and he took off. At one point, Kathleen offered Charles to a childless waitress at a bar in exchange for a pitcher of beer. 3 days later, however, Kathleen's brother Luther retrieved Manson from the waitress and brought him back to the family home. A pitcher of beer for your kid. In 1937, Kathleen sued Colonel Scott for paternity and was awarded $5 a month in child support. This equals out to $86 today. Well, I mean, I guess that's the Great Depression, so that was a lot of money, but still, like, damn. It doesn't seem that Colonel Scott was very consistent with his payments, however, and Kathleen and her brother Luther attempted an armed robbery in August of 1939, which saw both sent to prison, and Manson was placed with his mother's uncle and aunt in McMecken, West Virginia. While in McMecken, Manson discovered his love for singing while attending a local church. Another uncle that Manson spent time with, according to his own words, was with a Kentucky mountain man who would tell Manson of still maintaining Confederate sympathies and making moonshine. With his hillbilly uncle's approval, Manson set his school on fire and was sent to a reform school. In 1942, Kathleen was released from prison, taking Manson and relocating to Charleston, Virginia, where she spent her evenings partying and allowed him to play hooky from school all he wanted. A year later, they moved again to Indianapolis, where Kathleen married a man with the surname Lewis. In 1947, Manson was sent to the Gibault School for Boys, a Catholic reformatory, where Manson was abused by the staff for the smallest infractions. He ran away from the school and made his way to his mother, who immediately washed her hands of him and returned him to Gibault. In 1948, Manson ran away again, and this time he headed back to Indianapolis and robbed a grocery store. He used the proceeds of the robbery to get a small room in a flophouse and buy food. Manson took up a job working for Western Union and committing petty thefts to supplement his income. He was caught in 1949 and sent to Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska. Barely 4 days later, Manson and a fellow kid named Blackie Nelson broke out and escaped to Peoria, where they were taken on as apprentices by Nelson's professional thief uncle. His uncle was also a professional thief. However, Manson was arrested 2 weeks later. He was linked to a few armed robberies he had committed in the time and sentenced to the Indiana School for Boys. The school was much more strict than Boys Town and had been, and Manson was beaten and raped by other students, often with the encouragement of staff workers. Manson hated the school and escaped a total of 18 times. Damn. Finally, he managed to escape with 2 other students in 1951, and the trio robbed gas stations on their way to California until they were arrested in Utah. Manson was sent to the National Training School for Boys, a federal institution, as Manson had committed a federal crime by driving a stolen car over state lines. Okay. Manson was tested in the school and was discovered to have an IQ of 109. Okay, so he's got a little bit of above average. I mean, like average is, what was it, 100? 100 was it? So, yeah, he's intelligent. Adulthood. In October of 1951, Manson was sent to the minimum security prison National Bridge honor camp with a special recommendation from a prison psychiatrist. Later, he was due for a parole hearing in February 1952 with a potential release condition of living with an aunt. However, Manson was caught raping another boy under the threat of a knife. This caused him to be sent to the Federal Reformatory in Petersburg, Virginia, where he committed a series of serious disciplinary infractions, including 3 homosexual acts. His nonstop violent behavior and tactic of acting insane by speaking gibberish and waving his hands around forced the prison's hand. Manson was transferred to the maximum security prison in Chillicothe, Ohio. Here, Manson was a model prisoner, and his good behavior caused him to be released early to his aunt and uncle in McMecken. He was 20 years old at this time. In 1955, Manson married Rosalie Jean Willis, a hospital waitress, and later that year relocated to Los Angeles with her in a car he had jacked. 3 months later, Manson was arrested and charged again with driving a stolen car across state lines. God, man. He was given 5 years probation. However, when he failed to attend a hearing for a similar case in Florida, his probation was revoked and Manson was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment in Terminal Island. I wonder why they call it Terminal Island. That sounds like a place you go to die. I mean, terminal. Then again, I guess terminal is also like a turnoff. So, Rosalie gave birth to a son, Charles Milles Manson Jr., in 1956. Rosalie, their son, and Manson's mother, Kathleen, would visit him in the prison until these visits stopped. In 1957, Charles received word his wife was living with another man and attempted to escape just 2 weeks short of a parole hearing. He was caught, parole was denied, and he was given another 5 years probation. He just has some horrible luck. I mean, jacking, well, he shouldn't be stealing cars, but driving across state lines and, like, trying to break out before a parole hearing, it's like, He just has shitty luck. In September of 1958, excuse me, Manson was granted parole and was divorced from Rosalie. He built an income stream from pimping a 16-year-old girl and receiving cash from another girl with wealthy parents. Manson was considered exceptionally charming and handsome at that age. However, barely a year after being paroled, he was arrested for attempting to cash a forged U.S. Treasury check he had stolen. However, at the trial, a young woman named Leona spoke out passionately on Manson's behalf and asked the court for leniency. He received a 10-year sentence suspended and probation. Later that year, Manson and Leona married. Manson took Leona and another woman to New Mexico for prostitution purposes, and this resulted in him being arrested and questioned for human trafficking. Manson attempted to run for the border and was picked up in Laredo, Texas. For violating his probation, Manson was transferred to McNeil Island, Washington, at the U.S. Penitentiary to serve his 10-year sentence. While in prison, Manson was brought under the wing of Alvin Creepy Karpus, the former leader of the Barker Karpus gang, who trained him in guitar playing. During his time in McNeil Island, his mother moved to Washington to work as a waitress and be closer to her son. In 1963, when Manson was 29, Leona gave birth to his son, Charles Luther Manson, and subsequently was granted divorce from him. In prison, Manson was declared to have a severe form of narcissism and an unquenchable need for attention. In 1967, Manson was released from prison, having spent 32 years of his life stuck in prison. Having spent so much time in the prison and never having fit in with the outside world, Manson begged the prison warden to keep him inside, but this unusual request was denied. I don't know. I think I can't blame him. Especially back then with how times were changing and everything. I mean, he went from the 30s to the 40s to the 50s. Now he's, what, in the 60s. So I probably would have just stayed inside too, because prison don't ever change. I wouldn't know. I've never been to prison, but from what I hear, it never changes. Cult leader. Manson was released to San Francisco, and later he moved to Berkeley, which would have technically been a parole violation, but Manson's intense charm and ability to talk led to his probation offices being changed. Around this time, Manson began taking part in LSD experiments for study, and throughout 1967, Manson had begun preaching a combination of Bible, Beatles, Scientology, and various other philosophies that he had studied. His intense and psychedelic sermons soon had him gaining the attention of the impressionable hippies that flocked to Berkeley, seeking meaning in their life. His first follower was university librarian Mary Brunner, and then Lynette Fromm, and soon more followed. Manson's family would ultimately be consisted of Charles Tex Watson, who was a core member, Texas-born, Bobby Beausoleil, a core member, who was a aspiring musician and porn actor, Lynette Fromm, Mary Brunner, Susan Atkins, who was a core member, Patricia Krenwinkel, who was another core member, Leslie Van Houten, who was also a core member, Clem Grogan, Catherine Scher, Linda Kasabian, Bruce M. Davidson, Sandra Good, Paul Watkins, Ruth Ann Morehouse, Nancy Pittman, Catherine Lutzinger, Ella Jo Bailey, Catherine Gillies, Sherry Cooper, Danny DiCarlo, Brooks Poston. Good Lord, does he only attract women? I know the last, like, Danny and Brooks and Tex and all, I'm assuming are men. Barbara Hoyt, Diane Lake, and Deirdre Shaw, daughter of the late actress Angela Lansbury. Wow. By chance encounter, Manson's followers, Patricia Krenwinkel and Ella Jo Bailey, were picked up by Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys and driven to his residence. Soon more followed, and before long, the family was living in Wilson's fancy house rent-free, and he was footing the bill for their costs, including a huge medical bill covering their gonorrhea treatments. Ooh, and 21 grand for a car they destroyed. Manson put his guitar skills to the test, and Wilson paid for studio recording time for Manson to play. Eventually, Wilson got fed up with the family and moved out of the house when the lease was up. This caused the landlord to evict the Manson family. So he went from being like a petty criminal to being imprisoned forever to being like a cult leader, and he's apparently really good. I mean, he's good at really talking. You know, I see. He seems to have the erratic behavior of his mom, and apparently the charming skills of Colonel Scott, the father. So, yeah, I'd say he's a combination. After this mishap, the family relocated to an old, and plus he was able to record music and stuff. Oh, that was cool. Relocated to an old movie set and ranch known as Spawn Ranch in 1968. The ranch's owner was George Spawn, who was 80 and nearly blind. Texas-born family member Tex Watson gave horseback rides for income, while the women did chores for Spawn, including a few who would provide him with sexual activities. Oh my. One of his favorites being Lynette Fromm, who derived the nickname Squeaky from the noise she made when he pinched her thigh. This led to the family being allowed to stay rent-free. At the ranch, the group would engage in drug-fueled parties, with Manson spouting his philosophies through use of marijuana, LSD, and group self-discovery. I mean, it sounds like the hippie scene. I mean, for Woodstock, it sounds like they were having Woodstock every night. In 1968, Manson began to listen to the Beatles song Helter Skelter on a constant loop. He grew convinced that the Beatles were predicting a race war in which the African Americans would rise up and overthrow white people. Manson began prophetic teachings to his followers that the African Americans would succeed in their war, but would not be intelligent enough to maintain their survival, and it would be up to him to guide them, and they would serve him as their master. Yeah, it sounds like this was some bad use of drugs to come up with that kind of theory. Freak. Manson began putting together ideas on how to bring the apocalyptic war into action. Murders. On August 8th, 1969, Manson sent his followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Linda Kasabian, and Patricia Krenwinkel to 10050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles, and instructed them to totally destroy everyone inside. He also told the girls to leave a sign, something witchy. They arrived at the house just past midnight, with Tex cutting the telephone wire to the house and parking the car. The property was owned by famed director Roman Polanski. Oh, hell. Yeah, Rosemary's Baby. Yeah, that's good. I'm sure he's been... And plus, a lot of people don't know this, but Roman Polanski was actually in Rush Hour 2. Rush Hour 3. He was the French detective that, does the body cavity search on Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan. Which is kind of creepy when you think about it, because he lives in France because he's a convicted... Well, not convicted, he's charged statutory rapist. Okay, I'm sorry. This isn't about Roman Polanski. Who was in Europe at the time of shooting a film. And the property was hosting a party. The guests included Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, who was nearly 9 months pregnant, coffee heiress Abigail Folger. Oh, hey, coffee. We do love our Folgers here at Coffee and Crimes. Tate's friend-zoned former Jay Sebring. I shouldn't laugh, that's horrible. Polanski's friend, Wojciech Frykowski, property caretaker William Garretson, and Garretson's friend, Stephen Parent. That sounds like a hell of a party. Parent came up on the Manson group in the driveway and questioned who they were. Tex Watson lunged at Parent, slashing him with a knife and then gunning him down with a .22 pistol. After this, he ordered Linda Kasabian to keep watch as he and the others snuck in through a window. Once inside, Tex awoke Frykowski with a kick to the head, and to his inquiry replied, "I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work." Sounds like Devil's Rejects. I wonder if Rob Zombie, ripped that off. But then again, I guess Otis, the character, Bill Moses' character Otis, has, the beard and the long hair and stuff. I imagine he must be, a Manson XB or something. I'm sorry. I'm getting off topic. Krenwinkel and Atkins brought the others into the living room, tying rope around the necks of Tate and Sebring, then slung it over a roof beam. Sebring angrily protested the way they were treating the pregnant Tate, and Tex shot him and then stabbed him 7 times. Damn. Folger attempted to parlay the invaders with $70, but this didn't persuade them. Frykowski, managing to get out of his binds, attempted to flee the house. He made it out onto the front lawn, but was struck over the head by Tex and then stabbed multiple times. He continued to attempt to escape, but was continuously stabbed. Folger, who also attempted escape, But Krenwinkel gave chase, knocking her down into the backyard near the pool and began to stab her. Folger attempted to stop Krenwinkel, stating she was already dead. But Krenwinkel continued her onslaught, with Tex coming in to assist, finishing her off. Damn. Sharon Tate begged for her unborn child's life, offering anything in the house and herself as a hostage. However, Tex and Atkins proceeded to stab and slash Tate to death. Jeez. Using her blood, Atkins wrote "pig" on the front door, in an attempt to copy a previous murder in which family member Bobby Beausoleil had committed on Gary Hinman for an attempted robbery, and used his blood to write "political piggy" on the wall. The three regrouped with Kasabian and left for Spawn Ranch. Frykowski laid in the front yard. He had been stabbed 51 times, and his head had been smashed with the gun 13 times, so much that it broke the left grip of the pistol handle off next to his body. Did they pick it up, or did they just leave it? They probably just left it there. Folger's body was in the backyard. She had been stabbed 28 times. Sharon Tate's body was in the living room of the house. She had been stabbed 16 times. She was pregnant, like 9 months pregnant. Oh my God. The lack of immediate warfare from the murders upset Manson, who decided that more had to die in the attempt to spark the apocalypse. This time in a more clean way, as the near escapes of Folger and Frykowski had angered him. The next night, on August 10th, Manson, Watson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, Kasabian, Van Houten, and Grogan went for a drive in the Los Angeles night and arrived at 3301 Waverly Drive in Los Feliz neighborhood. The house belonged to Lino and Rosemary LaBianca, owners of a supermarket and dress shop, respectively. The group entered the house, with Manson awaking Lino at gunpoint, with Watson tying his hands and Rosemary being brought into the living room with him. Manson left, and the women brought Rosemary into the bedroom. Watson took a bayonet and stabbed Lino LaBianca in the throat. He then entered the bedroom to see Rosemary swinging a lamp at the Manson girls. He stabbed her in the neck, returning to Lino, and began stabbing him several times. He finished with carving "War" into his abdomen. Watson returned to the bedroom and discovered that Krenwinkel and Van Houten were stabbing Rosemary several times together. They proceeded to write "Rose, Death to Pigs" on the walls, and the misspelt "Helter Skelter," which is spelled with an H-E-A instead of an H-E, on the refrigerator door. As they left, Krenwinkel stabbed Lino's body 14 times with a fork and stuck a steak knife in his throat. Lino had been stabbed 12 times by Watson, and Rosemary had been stabbed 41 times. Fucking terrible. Arrest and trial. The police led an in-depth investigation after the Tate LaBianca murders. They managed to trace several of the crimes committed by the family, including stolen vehicles. They began a manhunt search for the Manson family members and raided the ranches the family took shelter in, including the Barker Ranch, where they had recently been staying. They arrested several, including Manson, who was hiding under a kitchen sink. While in jail, Susan Atkins began bragging to her fellow bunkmates about the murders she committed and giving vivid descriptions of each time. The police were informed, and soon warrants were put out for the arrest of Watson, Krenwinkel, and Kasabian, who had not been arrested with the main groups. Watson was picked up in McKinney, Texas, and Krenwinkel in Mobile, Alabama. Kasabian had left the family after the murders in an attempt to shed herself with the murderous group she had found herself in. She voluntarily surrendered herself to authorities in Concord, New Hampshire. The .22 caliber pistol was located. However, the knives used in the Tate murders were never recovered, whilst Atkins' knife was found in the LaBianca couch, she having lost it in the pandemonium. The trial began on January. Boy, we're getting it. On June 15th, 1970, Linda Kasabian was granted immunity in exchange for testifying against the family, having served as a lookout for the family during the Tate murders and not directly taken part in any of the murders. Manson, Atkins, and Krenwinkel were charged with 7 counts of murder and 1 count of conspiracy. Van Houten was charged with 2 counts of murder and conspiracy. During the first day of the trial, Manson showed up with an X that he had carved into his forehead. This was his bizarre way of showing that, having been found inadequate to serve as his own attorney, he had been X'd or canceled by the establishment in the modern world. This guy is just, he's out there. I mean, he's just I mean, I've seen like interviews with Manson before on like TV and stuff. And, you know, some of what he says makes sense. And then some of what he says is like, wow, like delusional. I mean, and I saw that one, I'm sorry, I saw that one interview and stuff where he went to ask a question. It was like, it's like he was like, I don't know if he had word salad or aphasia or something, but it's like, wow. The trial lasted for 7 months, with Manson making several bizarre and odd statements throughout. Members of the family camped outside of, in the corridors, and in some of the doors of the courthouse, giving interviews and making a general nuisance of themselves. On October 5th, Manson attempted to attack Judge Charles Older for not allowing him to cross-examine a witness. The judge began carrying a revolver under his robes from that day on. Yeah, that's something I'd expect to hear here in Oklahoma or something, but in California, shit, I guess judges don't fuck around or play around either. Sorry. Manson gave various excuses to the activities. At one point, he blamed the counterculture scene in music, blamed the establishment for turning its back on its children, and leveled blame on his own members, specifically Tex Watson. Anybody but himself. The defendants attempted to state the murders had been a copycat of Gary Hinman's death by Beausoleil. This defense failed. I just noticed that Beausoleil has been spelled several different ways each time that I've read it. That's, I guess he just has the no existing way of writing his name. I also noticed I've probably been mispronouncing Linda Kasabian's name, Kasabian. I had a friend. This isn't connected, but I had a friend who was Armenian, and IAN is a very is how they have their last names and stuff. It's I think it's the suffix of a lot of their last names ends in IAN, like Dasmalchian, Kasabian, and yeah, and that lawyer who was with OJ, and his daughters were really famous now. How can I not remember their name? Kardashian. Yeah, Kardashians. Kardashians are Armenian. Yeah, you know why I don't remember who they were and stuff, really? Because I've never seen an episode of Keeping Up with Kardashians in my life. And nor do I care to. Finally, on January 25th, 1971, Manson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, and Van Houten were found guilty on each of the 27 separate charges brought before them. During the sentencing phase, Manson shaved his head and trimmed his beard, stating that the reason was because I am the devil, and the devil is always bald. Okay. Why would the devil be bald? I mean, I suppose if it was that's something I would expect to hear from, what's his name, Anton LaVey, not Charles Manson. But then again, yeah, maybe it is something I would expect to hear from Charles Manson, considering all the other stuff he said. His co-defendants also shaved their heads after the jurors, but waited until after the jurors retired to decide the sentences. On April 29th, Judge Charles Older sentenced all 4 to death. Afterwards, Tex Watson had fought extradition long enough to not be among the 4 defendants, but was eventually extradited to California, where he was sentenced to death despite pleading insanity. However, in February of 1972, the California Supreme Court abolished the death penalty, and all 5 convicted members were commuted to life without parole. Manson was housed in San Quentin Prison, where he found protection from inmate attacks by serving as a sexual submissive to a member of the Aryan Brotherhood. Man, that must have been like a knockdown from your power trip. I mean, dude, then again, I guess he'd been in prison, so he knew how to survive, but, he goes from being, considered, God, kind of, by, all these beautiful women and stuff, and then he's, spending his time, he's spending every day as a woman, in prison terms, a woman, to a skinhead. It just seems like a really just knock you off your tower kind of thing. Manson changed the carved X on his forehead into a swastika in an attempt to continue in his anti-establishment practices. Some of Manson's followers moved closer to the prison to visit him and send gifts. Two of these were Sandra Good and Lynette Fromm. On September 6, 1975, Fromm attempted to assassinate U.S. President Gerald R. Ford in Sacramento, where Manson was serving time in Folsom Prison. Damn. That escalated. Fromm was sentenced to 15 years to life in federal prison for attempting to assassinate the president. Sandra Good would later serve 10 years out of a 15-year sentence for sending death threats. On September 25, 1984, Manson was sent to the California Medical Facility after inmate Jan Holmstrom, angry at Manson's threats against his Hare Krishna chants, poured paint thinner on him and set him aflame. This caused second and third degree burns to 20% of Manson's body. In 1997, Manson was found to be a trafficking drugs and sent to the Corcoran. Is it Corcoran or Corsoran? I don't know. No one knows. Or I'm sure people know. I don't care. State prison. Manson gave several interviews in prison. In the early 2010s, Manson was alleged to be having a relationship with a fangirl known as Star, who had a marriage certificate ready to be signed and everything. This was later shown to be a fraud, and as a way for Manson to continue to receive gifts and money, supposedly. Charles Milles Manson died on November 19, 2017 in a Bakersfield hospital due to cardiac arrest and respiratory failure brought on by colon cancer. He was 83 years old. Why was he... I'm sorry. This is one of those times where I wish they had kept the death penalty because, guy was obviously a lunatic and, he got all these people to kill for him and stuff. That's something I don't want to say what's his name because it's too, well, so I'll say Stalin instead because everybody knows H. So I'll say Stalin. Well, you know what? I'll say it. Hitler got people to kill for him and stuff too and stuff. And he should have been executed. I guess he was executed by himself, but all these terrible people and stuff seem to always get some kind of a way out, except for Mussolini. Mussolini got hanged and beaten and shot and all that kind of stuff. But Manson, I think Manson should have got the death penalty, and they should have kept it. And I don't know. After him and his followers were executed, maybe then they could have, abolished it. I think they have it now, but I guess after they reinstated it, he wouldn't be able to get it reinstated because he was on life in prison. I think I read that somewhere that once it's been commuted, they can't reinstate the death penalties. And I'm sure they could if he killed someone in prison. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I should have went to law school. I didn't. I'm sorry. Final notes. Charles Manson was found guilty of 7 counts of murder. However, he never actively took part in any of the murders, but had them committed by proxy. He was accused of having shot drug dealer Bernard Crowe in 1969, but Crowe survived. Manson's body, after his death, was claimed by 3 people. The first claimant is former MMA fighter Jason Freeman, who was the son of Manson's firstborn son, Charles Jr. The second claimant is longtime Manson pen pal Michael Channels, who claimed to have a will Manson sent him that left him his body and the estate. The third claimant is Matthew Roberts, who alleges that Manson was his father. In 2012, CNN ran Roberts' DNA to see if it was a match with DNA submitted by Jason Freeman. However, it was not a match. Still, however, these matches may have been contaminated, so who knows? I've actually talked to Matthew Roberts. He's a really nice guy and stuff, really nice guy, and he looks like Manson. So I think that Matt Roberts is probably his son. Freeman won the case against Channels and Roberts and was given Manson's body, which he promptly cremated and scattered. Manson's father, Colonel Walker Henderson Scott, died of cirrhosis of the liver in December 1954, around the time his son was released from the pen in Chillicothe, Ohio. He had gotten married and divorced in the time between and had 2 more sons, Colonel Walker H. Scott, Jr., who passed in 2021, and Robert Ellis Scott, who passed in 1996. Manson may have never known his father or any of his half-brothers, but is known to have used the Scott name during a parole hearing. Okay. That'd be pretty difficult, I suppose. Like, never knowing your father and your brothers and stuff like that. That didn't seem like he really cared, though. Manson is known to have had 3 children in his life: Charles Milles Manson Jr., Charles Luther Manson, and Valentine Michael Manson. He may have also had more children, including the aforementioned Matthew Roberts. Charles Manson Jr. changed his name to Jay White and later committed suicide in 1996. Charles Luther Manson changed his name to Jay Warner and lives in anonymity. Valentine Michael Manson took the name of his mother, Mary, and now lives as Michael Bruner. He has given an interview describing life as a son of Charles Manson. In 2022, a man named Daniel Argulis petitioned for Manson's estate, claiming to be a son of Manson and backing up his claim with an ancestry DNA match that paired Michael Bruner as his paternal half-brother. I'm sure the guy's got lots of kids out there. I mean, dude had like 50,000 women living with him. I'm sure he must have had several children. Manson's followers languished in prison. Susan Atkins married twice and died of brain cancer on September 24, 2009. Tex Watson became a prison chaplain and routinely refuses parole hearings. He married and divorced in prison. Lynette Squeaky Fromm was released on parole in 2009, now living in New York. She still stands by Manson and proclaims her love for him. Leslie Van Houten, Patricia Quinwinkle, and Bobby Beausoleil, once again misspelled, or spelled differently, remained incarcerated in prison. Ruth Morehouse, along with Clem Grogan, Catherine Scher, and Dennis Rice, spent years in prison for attempting to kill former member Barbara Hoyt to keep her from serving as a witness and testifying against Manson. Morehouse has since sworn off the family and had the X on her forehead removed. Grogan was paroled in 1981. Scher was released in 1975 and now talks openly against cults in the family. Barbara Hoyt pursued a career in nursing and became friends with Deborah Tate, Sharon's sister. She passed away in 2017. Mary Bruner was paroled in 1977 and has slipped into anonymity. Since the 1980s, Linda Kasabian has been living in Washington trying to make ends meet and recently experienced the loss of her daughter to prison for drug possession. Damn. George Spahn lived for another year on his ranch with the remaining Manson women, but a wildfire decimated hhis ranch, forcing him to sell off and return to his wife that he had abandoned several years earlier. He eventually died in the Sherwood Convalescent Hospital in Van Nuys, California, at the age of 85. On May 27, 1969, Darwin Orell Scott, brother of Colonel Walker Scott, was found dead in his apartment in Ashland, Kentucky. He had been hacked to death, and the theory is that Manson might have been responsible for the death of the long-lost uncle in an attempted robbery. However, given that Darwin Scott had 86 fifths and 28 pints of whiskey in his apartment, it is more likely he was murdered by partners in a moonshine operation. One of the prisoners that Manson served time with in prison was Danny Trejo, the actor known as Machete from Spy Kids and the Machete films. Wow. It's good that, because Danny Trejo became like a big time actor and stuff. That's pretty cool. Charles Manson, the Manson family, and the murders committed have been the focus of many books, films, series, and documentaries. Some of the movies that recreate or have the Manson family in their plot include 1976 film Helter Skelter, 1980 film Assassins, a Broadway show. What? 1990 Manson family, an opera, a musical opera about the Manson family. Nice. Well done. Don't expect me to buy tickets to it. 2003's The Manson Family, 2004's Helter Skelter, 2014's House of Manson, 2015's Manson Family Vacation, an indie comedy, 2015 to 2016 Aquarius TV series, 2017 Mindhunter, Manson appears in the second season, 2017 American Horror Story Cult, 7th season of the show, 2018 Charlie Says, featuring Doctor Who's Matt Smith as Charles. Hey, I've seen Charlie Says. That's a good film. 2019's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is historical fiction. written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, which I've seen part of. I wasn't too, I didn't like it. I mean, I liked how they recreated everything, but I didn't really like it. Manson's estate, which includes several of the songs he recorded and valued at millions or at least hundreds of thousands, has yet to be awarded to anybody. The most, whoever wrote this decided to put it small, tiny glasses. Was supposed to be presented to Jason Freeman, or awarded to Jason Freeman, but has since been opposed by petition by Daniel Aguilares, the supposed son who shares the DNA match with Michael Brunner. So the two family are currently fighting for Manson's estate. Well, apparently I'm a cousin to Manson, and I can say that you cannot even pay me enough to want any of his garbage. So, sorry, not gonna happen. Some of Manson's songs he recorded in his studio time can be heard on YouTube and are supposed to be released on an album that hasn't seen light yet. And that was made back in the 60s, so I don't think we'll ever see that album. Though I'm sure there are like ripped songs and stuff in an album out there. I don't know. This episode was long, and quite frankly, I'm glad, because I know those short ones are good for like short listens and stuff like that. But I mean, I like to do long episodes and stuff. I'd like to have episodes that range into an hour or two. I mean, if anybody would like that, please comment down below. Let me know. I can have our script writer write longer episodes potentially, or I could just slow down. I suppose. Good thing they provide a transcript with some of these episodes, because sometimes I get lost listening to myself. Also, don't listen to me while you're driving. Don't play these videos while you're driving at night, because you will probably fall asleep. I used to be told I had a very hypnotic voice that could cause you to go to sleep if you listen to me talk and stuff for long periods of time, especially if I just drone on. And I apologize if I caused you to have a car wreck. I really enjoyed this episode. I hope that y'all enjoyed it too. And this has been Coffee and Crimes. I've been your host, Tyler Groff von Rebick, and I will see you next time.